Hello, hello, hello. We are coming in live for our weekly Tuesday night live of the Reboot Show. Tonight I'm joined by Luke Stowe and Amy Smith. Hello, guys.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, Sally.
Hey, Amo. We're here to have an exciting discussion. So for those of you who might have tuned in last week, we were having an interesting conversation about robotics and the impact of robotics in the workforce, if you like. And we were speaking about a particular example that had sort of hit headlines in the news around was it the US Air Force, I believe?
Yeah, that's right.
So this week, what we wanted to do was have a bit of a conversation around maybe what some of these new technologies mean for the workforce, and something in particular that is a major focus at the moment is this conversation around reskilling workforces. I think it's a really broad conversation, and maybe to kickstart, Amy, it'd be great to hear from you around what are the first things that come to mind when you think about reskilling a workforce?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, depending on the context. So for me, I always think about the gap. Like that's the first thing that springs to mind is where is the gap between the workforce and what they're currently capable of doing and what they actually need to be doing, whether that's just to perform business as usual activities or if it's actually to meet some of the future requirements and capabilities of that workforce. So I see sort of reskilling as closing that gap. So that's the way that I sort of think of it. And often we split it into two parts. You know, there can be what's called the hard skills, which are more of the real technical, you know, on the job skills. And then you've got the soft skills, which is like your communication skills, for example. So that's where my mind goes when we talk about reskilling.
So bridging the gap, how does an organisation even begin to understand what gap they actually have? Because particularly pre-COVID, I can imagine there was a large sense of complacency for a lot of organisations. So they'd just be sort of treading water and this is fine, we're doing what we're doing. Luke, what are your thoughts on how does an organisation even begin to understand where their gaps are?
Yeah, look, I think this is, you know, it's a pretty big conversation. I think there's probably the need to talk about it in terms of a couple of levels. So at one level, I think it's a country by country. So I really think that there's sort of a global issue here. Then there's country by country, then there's industry, and then organisations within those industries. And I think so tackling it at each of those levels is really important in this conversation. You know, we know that there is a move for de-globalisation. We're seeing a lot of macroeconomic or a lot of macro politics. These issues are causing a de-globalisation of trade and lots of other things. So at the moment, I think that's really quite a critical backdrop to reskilling, because what it means is we have to really focus country by country on what it is that we're planning on doing with our workforce and how are we going to incubate that reskilling and make it work for individuals.
But do you think that means, though, that there's a greater focus on procuring domestic talent now? Or is it more so an opportunity to access global talent because, for example, being in a different country is no longer something that's potentially a threat to being able to get an opportunity?
Yeah, look, I think the technology part of this puzzle is really multi-dimensional. So we know that some countries don't have the type of network capability and the security around those networks that perhaps other countries do. So that's the first thing. Second thing is some countries have more technology skills than other countries. So I think there has to be, global workforce, I think will still always be there, particularly with the amount of freelancers we have and the amount of work that you can move around offshore. But I really think that there'll become a sovereignty play here for most countries where they're looking at how do I get my people in my country back and working. We're seeing this in the US, we're seeing this in Brazil, seeing this in countries like India for a while, but really there's a focus on how do I maintain and start to create jobs for the workforce in the country.
So should employees be excited about this, or should they be nervous about what's happening?
Well, it's a bit of both, right? We've been thrown into this whole new world, so it's not all, rainbows and unicorns for a lot of organisations out there. But I think there are real opportunities when you look for it as well. To Luke's point, there's a huge increase in the mobility of the workforce now within, your domestic country. So you don't necessarily need to be looking for someone, within a 5-kilometre radius of the CBD to access someone that has an abundance of talent and maybe a rare skill set that might be living in a regional area. Like, they can work for you remotely, and that's a huge opportunity that organizations perhaps weren't able to access before. So I think that's an example of something that, is an opportunity for organizations, but it does come with the challenges. I think a lot of people are having to unlearn a lot of things that perhaps have been ingrained in the way that we've worked. And when it comes to communication, as an example, maybe it's unlearning the way that you used emails, and maybe that's taken on a different form in terms of that communication in your workforce when it is all remote. So there's different ways of doing things now. So I think there is that process, and it takes a collective effort. It's not just one-sided. It's a two-way street between employees and employers to take on that responsibility too.
So thinking about unlearning things, I think that's a really good point, Amy, because there's sort of this age-old saying that, it takes you 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. So when we're thinking about reskilling, and potentially a part of that reskilling process is unlearning certain things so that we can effectively move forward, how do we as leaders of organizations actually manage our expectations when we are going on this reskilling journey, if you like? Because it's not going to be the same for every organization. It's not going to be going to be the same for every single discipline. So where do we even start with that in terms of trying to manage what we might expect out of that process when we do start to discover where our gaps are?
Just checking that question was to
It can be,
great.
if you'd like it to be.
So,
I'm happy to overtake you, Luke, though.
well, let's share.
As long as you don't agree. As long as you don't agree.
Okay, all right.
General Assembly, I think, did some research about this. General Assembly is the education business, and they did some research on this. It said 480 hours was the optimum amount of time that they could take someone into either online or classrooms and train them to be a coder or to be an architect or to be, one of those key technology roles, maybe in AI. I think that is a good benchmark. And what's required here is that organisations and government work together. This is going to be a huge funding exercise to reskill a global economy around a new digital business way of working. So this requires government funding at a macro level and also at a micro level for the small to medium enterprises and the technology spend, so that they can actually do what we're asking them to do here.
It's an interesting point, like very domestic focused, but interesting. I was speaking with someone last week who heads up Small Business Australia, and he was referencing how the Australian government is on this major initiative to even help smaller businesses become digitally enabled, because they've really suffered during this time because they don't have the resources and they wouldn't even know where to start in terms of accessing those sorts of expertise. I just want to share a comment we've had from it. I'm going to try and share it on the screen. Can you see that, Amy?
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah.
Hi, comment.
Hi, Shahab. Thanks very much for your comment.
Yeah, this is great. So I would say reskilling is adapting to utilising new ways of getting things done and utilising the existing skills and coupling it with other related skills, etc. I think it's a really good point, right? It's, for example, highlighting the difference in marketing in, say, 1990 versus 2020. Would you say, Amy, it'd be great to hear from you on this. Would you say that there's like any particular, say, whether it's discipline, a role or function that's maybe seen such a drastic change similar to that of marketing where it's been completely disrupted?
Yeah, well, I think we're all in for some disruption across the board, but particularly, when you look at just the technology industry as an example, that is shifting at such a rapid pace. I don't think anyone expected it to move as quickly as what it's doing. So I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen within organizations, that reskilling or retraining or whatever you want to call it, it's not just a static thing where there's a start and an end date. Perhaps you reach a certain amount of hours or you reach, a particular course end date. It's actually an ongoing process. So there shouldn't be an end date to it. This is going to be a very, very long game for a lot of organizations and government and everyone that's involved. So I think if there's that mindset shift, particularly in technology, from what we're seeing, is that it's just an ongoing process.
Do you think this is, did you want to jump in quickly?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I know we like to steer clear of politics on the show, but I've just got everything that is going on and sort of, this talk around sort of de-globalization or whatever you might like to refer to it as. Is this creating an elevated level of competition between governments in terms of this race to be able to build out the best talent because they can't, for example, maybe tap into global talent the way they once did? Yeah,
look, I certainly think there's an element of that. I think this has to be made on a country by country basis, and governments will be, really keen, particularly in election time, to make sure that their workforce is back up and running and people are back in employment. But let's not forget here that millions of people are out of jobs because we've been forced into these lockdowns because of coronavirus. People need to go back to work. So reskilling is going to be really a focus of each and every Prime Minister, ruler, whatever you want to call it. They want their people back in work as quickly as possible. So reskilling needs to be quick, needs to be efficient, it needs to be technology enabled, and they all want to be the best technology country in the world. So this is going to be an exciting time to be involved in technology, I would think.
But I think that transition back into work, it's a really interesting conversation. I think quite a broad one as well. And it'd be good to hear any thoughts you might have on this, Amy, based on your experience. But thinking about some of the scarring that's happened throughout this process, like if you think about just sort of day-to-day livelihoods, I know myself personally, even when restrictions are fully lifted, if you like, I'm not going to feel comfortable just sort of going into large groups of people. I'm still going to feel quite nervous and maybe scared, if they're the words to describe it, because of the scarring that's happened as a result of this. And I think there's a similar situation for organizations in the context of sort of, re-engaging employees, particularly when they've been out of the workforce for a while. Like, that's going to be scarring there. I think that's going to take time, and it's not going to be just when someone's been unemployed for a certain time pre-COVID. It's quite different this time, would you say?
Yeah. And I mean, just as an example, there was always been, I guess, a stigma around people if they've been out of work for an extended period of time and they have a gap on their resume, right? And that is out the window. That rule book needs to be thrown out the window because it's just not relevant anymore for the times that we're in. There is an abundance of people out there that have a huge level of skill that they may not just recognize at the moment. So I think there has to be a lot of work on those transitional skill sets that can be used across industry, across sectors and across functions. And I think where the organization needs to come into play is really helping to help people reimagine their roles and what they can actually do within those roles. So it might even be a case, and I'm hoping that this is where we're headed, is where organizations actually have a bit more of a two-way street in that recruitment process to work with people when they're bringing them into their organization to say, hey, we can recognize that you've got a whole bunch of transitional, skills here that we can use. How about what if the role looks like this, rather than trying to put people into a box? Because I think that's traditionally what's happened in recruitment. And I, for one, am excited to see that old rule book get thrown out and start creating some new rules around that.
Wait, can I just ask quickly? Sorry.
Right.
Are job descriptions out the window? I heard someone reference recently that the future of work is most people will be working in project-based natures or freelance natures. That's the future of work. And I know myself, I've always been very fond of don't confine yourself to a job description. I've been criticised for that before on LinkedIn, but a job description, I think so many people will be excited to hear that they can help design what their work actually looks like.
Look, I've been a fan of this forever. And I think Amy will have a job cut out for her. I know you're in the HR space. And look, I'm doing a couple of things. One, people who have been working from home don't want to go back to the office. And they've even said, I'm doing my work from Sydney and I live in another state, for Australia, for example. I don't want to move back. I want to stay where I am. I'm happy. I don't need to come back. The weather's better. We don't have the same, type of
no traffic.
And so, that type of issue. Then you've got the issue of people saying, can you believe it? Can I get a pay review? Now we've been in for the last 12 months and your business has made no money. Can you give me a pay review, please? Are they crazy?
So
you got a job.
Workplace disputes is a growing sector. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think this whole part of HR and culture needs to be looked at, because I agree with you. I think job descriptions and people feeling like that's my categories and I only do that and where's my pay rise, please? And look, I think that's got to change.
Culture's going to be a massive one. Like, think about losing the human connectedness in the physical world and what that actually means for culture, and you no longer have that luxury. What's considered a luxury?
Well, companies will just need to get really intentional about it. You're going to have to inject those cultural elements into the day-to-day for people, because it's not just going to happen naturally at the office. If someone has a birthday and you all jump into the kitchen and have a bit of cake for the afternoon, you know, you're going to need to set up a Zoom meeting for that and make it a bit of fun in amongst the work. And it's those little cultural elements that you can, you know, sprinkle through your organization. They're going to need to be really thought out. They're going to need to be intentional moving forward, not just ad hoc.
Can I just say just a bit of, like, I'd love to see that you get that sort of little briefcase sent to you, and you open it, your logo on it, you open it and it says your mission today is this, and they give you a specific job for the day. I think that'd be
like
great.
It's out of like a fiction film.
Yeah, I think that's a movie running in your head, Luke. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it just gives a bit of excitement to the day. I mean, people job descriptions, I think they're out the window.
Yeah. Now, I agree in terms. Sorry, Sally, you go. No, I was just going to say, I agree with you that we're moving well and truly towards more project-based roles. You know, I think the full-time 9-to-5 sort of construct that we've had for such a long time is quite outdated. And I think that, you know, COVID has just sort of shown us that we can work differently, we can do things differently. And so the organisations that I think pick this up and run with it and start to think a bit differently, they're the ones that are going to win at the end.
Make it more enjoyable, people and culture people.
Yeah.
Advice.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot to do something really important at the beginning of this live. If you are coming in live, especially on LinkedIn, please make sure you drop a 1 below. If you're coming in on the replay, please be sure to drop a 2 below. And as always, let us know where you're coming in from. A couple of people already have. Now, guys, mindful of time. So I know today we haven't spoken about any specific sort of technology applications or anything like that, but largely what we're talking about is this growing relationship between human and tech and how COVID has sort of accelerated that in some ways. So we have a very exciting event coming up on the 30th of September at 6 p.m. Amy, did you want to share with everyone the details of what's happening?
Yes, we're really excited. We are partnering up with WeWork to do an exclusive Reboot live show. And we'll be touching on some of the topics that we've talked about today and really about that human experience at work moving forward and what that looks like, and the role of technology, the role of AI and automation and what that has to do with the future of work, and then what impact that's going to have on your clients, your customer experience and all the different moving parts. So we're really excited to be able to, really just dive deep into that topic with WeWork. It'll be great.
Yeah, I'm really what are you looking forward to most about the event, Luke?
I just can't wait to have some arguments with both of you and, you know, really bring our technology knowledge about AI to the table. I'm looking forward to it.
Beautiful. Yeah. We'll make sure to share the link with everyone who has tuned in with us today. Thank you very much for joining us live on the Reboot show this evening. Just for the record, we do stream live every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we also have this Friday, drum roll, Luke.
This Friday. What's happening on Friday? Oh, the news every 12 o'clock. I'm going to check my 12 o'clock every Friday. Amy and I do the news, and it's quite an informative and exciting news feed, that's for sure.
Beautiful. And we've just heard from Ian before closing. He is in Melbourne, very much like Luke and myself, and nearly COVID-free, which is very exciting for all of us.
Yeah, thanks for joining in.
Beautiful. Thanks, Amy. Have a great night, guys.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Thanks for watching. Bye.